What's going on, my fellow Kino Lords? So I'm a little bit late on this one, but this is yet another one of those videos where I get everybody up to speed on the films that I watched in the previous month. In this case, it's the month of May. And, I just pick a handful of films that I feel like I kind of want to talk about. So without wasting anybody's time, let's just jump right into this. We're going to start with a film called Love and Pop. Love and Pop is a Japanese film from the same filmmaker that is incredibly beloved that made the Neon Genesis series, including the movies Evangelion. I don't know how to pronounce it, but yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any of that. Hopefully, one day I'll watch the anime and then watch the movie. Don't know when that's gonna be, but I hear nothing but like just extraordinary things about it. But Love and Pop was an interesting and unique kind of experience. Honestly, for like the first 15 minutes or so, I really wasn't digging it. And for the first like few minutes, I thought I had the wrong movie because, in terms of the camera quality and in terms of just the presentation, it just was screaming amateur hour. And I was like, this has to be some sort of weird like student film. I can't have the right movie. As the film progressed, I started realizing and kind of understanding the approach and kind of the odd complexity and uniqueness of it. And then I started realizing, yeah, like, okay, I do have the right film. It's just and it has an aesthetic presentation to it that I don't think I've really seen in any movie. It has this it like kind of combines this authentic type of feel when it comes to like film genres like found footage and documentary slash mockumentary and just like home video style footage. Like it's all shot on this kind of like hand camcorder kind of video camera. And you can tell just by looking at it, like it has that kind of what is supposed, it's intentional, but it does have that kind of amateur quality look to it, not in terms of camera angles and stuff, but just in terms of the quality and how it looks. But it like combines again like this home video documentary found footage kind of approach, but at the same time not really being any of those things, which does make it pretty unique. It's not meant to be any of those things. It's its own thing, and it essentially, in terms of plot and character, like what this movie does, it follows what I believe is four young women, and which I'm led to believe that they range from ages 16 to 18, and basically follow them and one character in particular for a good chunk of this movie. And basically, we're just like along for the ride when it comes to their adventures and misadventures of what they call in this film subsidized dating, which is basically, grown Japanese men that are lonely that pay these young women for dates. And again, just dates, like whether it's just to go out and have lunch or whether it's to go out and sing karaoke. Like that's kind of how these high school girls are making money. And it kind of goes down in this darker rabbit hole as the film progresses of that world, in a way kind of like showcasing the ugliness of men in general and how perverse they are. At least these types of men, and also again showcasing the dangers of this kind of business. And I'll talk more about this later, but another thing about this movie that I thought was interesting and unique was the editing style and how many different camera angles and approaches it had. Like, yes, it's like I said, it's a very like intentionally crappy video quality for the most part, but it's actually quite elaborate and like very extensive in terms of how many different camera angles are chosen at any given moment in this movie. There's a lot of like first person perspective shots. There's a lot of random like crane shots that are very elaborate. There's a lot of like mounted, almost like GoPro style shots. So like in terms of cinematography, it's really ambitious and all over the place. And in terms of the editing, like even the editing, it's very in times can be really erratic and very stylistic. It's just overall in terms of aesthetic presentation an incredibly experimental and um ambitious kind of movie. Um which is what makes it, really unique, and what allowed me to kind of actually get more on board with it as I was watching it, because at first it was actually what I wasn't on board with. It was actually what turned me off, but as it progressed, I realized like this is a different and unique experience and made me appreciate it as it went along. Um, but as a whole, by the end of it, I mean, I enjoyed it, but I'm not really in love with it. Like I like it, but I feel like thematically, it just didn't really stick the landing. Like there's, again, as I mentioned, there's substance here, you know, revolving around the world of subsidized dating and sex work, and themes here about the kind of like deprivation of sexuality and the loneliness amongst men, especially grown men, but also like young men in this movie. They're arguably the worst ones in this movie. But I feel like this movie's runtime, because it's a pretty, I mean, it's not a long movie, but for what it is, it feels quite long. And I just feel like it doesn't explore enough, and it doesn't really have a very clear message about this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, I'm all for like ambiguity, obviously, but some of the stuff comes off kind of questionable. Like especially by the end of this film, it just feels there's an element about it that I feel like makes sex work feel shameful, and women who partake in that and are a part of that career field kind of like a shameful, and like in a way they aren't valuing themselves, and just kind of like it felt a little off-putting. But I feel like the film wasn't trying to do that. It's just I feel like it didn't explore it enough for me to come away with something more than that. Because I feel like essentially this movie, in terms of the character theme, it is about a woman that is feeling like the friends around her are growing up and progressing in their lives a lot faster than she is, and she is desperately trying to kind of do something on her own so she can have a sense of growth and fulfillment, and just like a sense of that she's doing something on her own, and like without the help of her friends, and just growing on her own. And there's like this very desperate and anxiety filled vibe that leads to like a really deep existential crisis. Especially by the end of it, we get this kind of like existential, artsy kind of ending regarding her character, that kind of does have like a nihilistic attitude a little bit. But overall, I just feel like thematically it could have had a lot more, especially for the runtime. And there was something about the way it delivered its themes that felt a little off-putting. But this is a film that I wouldn't mind rewatching someday. But for right now, I'll give it a solid to strong 6 out of 10. And I still recommend it for, y'all to try it out, because it is a unique movie, and it's free on YouTube as well. So if you want to check it out, it's there. But all right, let's move on to the next film. This is a film called Raise the Red Lantern. This is a movie that is directed from the same filmmaker as Hero and a lot of other Chinese films. And I actually have a review for Hero, thanks to Jada requesting it. But I liked Hero quite a bit. I thought that was a pretty great movie. But I gotta say, I think Raise the Red Lantern is even better. I loved Raise the Red Lantern. Like, first of all, one of the most beautiful looking movies I've ever seen. In terms of direction and cinematography and overall presentation, it is bonkers great. Like it is fantastic. This is really is like one of those movies where you can kind of use the cliche term every frame of painting, because like every single frame of this movie, is not only framed beautifully, lit beautifully, um, but there's a lot of intention, like artistic intention behind pretty much every frame of this movie. Um, and it's just an absolute visual treat to watch. And like even like because most of the film is very delicately framed. A lot of stationary shots, what have you, where you can tell that they really took a lot of time with each shot and each setup. But even like near the end, where we get kind of more intense sequences, there's some moments where we kind of get these handheld, a little bit shaky camera movements that, again, like, it's barely in the movie, but when it's there for a specific purpose. And I just love when a film has so much artistic intention and motivation behind the shots. And this is a film where, like, again, every single shot in this movie is so fucking great. But in terms of plot, I mean, this is a movie where our main character, she's a grown woman in China who for years has kind of refused to marry, but because of the death of her father, she decides to just kind of succumb to the wills of society, for basically survival purposes. And she basically sells herself off to an incredibly wealthy man. And when she gets there, she's basically competing against 3 other wives that were there already. And as the film progresses, we see like the kind of corner that women are put in, to where they're kind of naturally pitted against each other for the man's attention, because it's like, what else do they really have? This is their life. They are sold here. So they have really no other joy or purpose but to gain the man's attention in whatever way they can, whether it means mostly sabotaging the other wives that are there. And that's basically it. So that's basically it. The whole movie is like the constant distrust and sabotage of the wives that they have for each other. And even the maid in this movie that desperately thought that she was gonna, she had the assumption that she was gonna move up, but she also wants to gain the attention of the man, because she wants to move up in the ranks of society and have a purpose, because that's all women are allowed to have, really. And that's basically how this movie goes. Like, throughout the whole movie, we get different character. It explores the character dynamics amongst all the wives, and we get different conflicts and plot points that result into a climactic and kind of tragic conclusion. But by the end of it, it felt incredibly haunting. It's had a really haunting ending, both literally and figuratively, very haunting. And overall, like, I just think is a really, really rewarding and just a well-earned experience. And I definitely recommend it, because I feel like not a lot of people really talk about this movie. I didn't know this movie existed until that was brought up in my Discord server, which, by the way, if you want to join the Discord, $5 a month on Patreon. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have much more to say, but it's a fantastic film and I highly recommend it. I'll give Raise the Red Lantern a soft 9 out of 10. It's really, really great. All right, now we're going to move on to a film called Fish and Cat. This is an Iranian film that I feel like is very obscure. Like, I don't know, like, a lot of people do not know about this movie. And I can kind of see why after watching it. Not going to be everybody's cup of tea at all. Definitely wasn't the Discord's cup of tea in general. But I enjoyed this movie for the most part, honestly. Like, basically, this is a movie, in a very general surface level sense. Yeah, it's inspired by true events that happened in Iran, where restaurant owners were caught selling and serving human meat to customers without their knowledge. And there was this whole thing where like a bunch of them were shut down, and it was a whole thing. But this movie's inspired by that, and we basically have these. It's hard to say main characters. Not really main characters. They're just two of many characters that we follow in this movie. But yeah, the two like villains of this movie, or I guess three villains in this movie, are they are the cannibals that secretly murder people, and they eat them themselves and serve them to others. And we kind of follow them. The camera follows them for a long time, and then we slowly move on to all these kinds of different characters within the narrative. And I don't know, this movie is, again, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, mostly because of the fact that it takes its sweet ass time, and it's presented in one single take. I don't know if it's a true single one shot take. Again, like I don't know. There's a lot of films that is presented in a one shot take, but there's a lot of tricks involved to where it's not that. But it really did seem like one shot take. Just eyeballing it. And either way, even if it's not, at least the majority of the film is a one shot take, and it's insanely impressive to me. Like, you could just tell that there was a sheer magnificent amount of direction and choreography involved to pull the shit off, because not only do we follow so many different characters that have long stretches of dialogue and also long stretches of walking between scenes, which is I think a reason why it's not gonna be a rice cup of tea as well. But there's like this really odd surreal deja vu kind of time warp element to this whole narrative presentation, where we go in almost in this weird circle after circle, in this weird loops, where we follow characters in one situation, and then later on we get to see that situation from a different character's perspective as we follow their character and what they did afterwards, and it kind of goes in this really weird, repetitive and surreal, and again slash deja vu type of time perspective that honestly is like a huge reason why I did end up liking this movie, because it made it interesting, and it crafted a really odd atmosphere involving time, and I just really dug that about it. I did. It just, the time loops and everything, it just made it to where it made it very it made it to where it kind of reminds us that we don't really have a grasp and a proper understanding of how time really works. There's so much about time that we really don't understand, and I think the way that this film did that weird time warp thing throughout it was just really, really absorbing, and I enjoyed it. And it made for me like the one shot take stuff like a lot more impressive. Just how it kind of goes around and in and out of things and weaves like the character causation and the conflict causation with each other was just really, really cool and bizarre. But again, like there's long stretches of like, what a lot of people would perceive as pointless dialogue amongst characters, but it's really just there to, I think, amplify a sense of the mundane, and how like, not only kind of make it feel grounded and rooted in this really odd way, but in another way kind of express the reality of, 1 second you could just be talking about flying kites with your friend, and in the reality there's two fucking serial killer cannibals in the woods that are looking for their next victim. So I don't know, like, again, my main problem with this movie is the runtime. To me, is way too long. It's like 2 hours and some change, like 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think given the content that is in this movie, it does not need that runtime. I think like an hour and 40 minutes, maybe an hour and 50 minutes is like the correct justifiable runtime. But I think it does go on, I think, for too long for what this film offers. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of really neat things going on in this movie. And I think if it was shorter, I would have enjoyed it even more. Um, but yeah, and the ending to this film was great. Like the actual like last 5 minutes and the closing shot I think is wonderful. Just really well crafted and well shot stuff. Really creative, and I really enjoyed it. Um, but anyway, that's all I'll say for now on Fishing Cat, and I'll give that movie a solid 7 out of 10. All right, move on to the next film, which is Goodbye Dragon Inn. Um, yeah, this is a. I think it's another film that's not going to be like everybody's cup of tea, because it's a very intentionally slow meditative experience. In terms of plot, it's very minimal. All this really is in concept is, a really famous theater that basically shuts down. It's the last day of the theater, and it's screening the film Dragon Inn. Um, you know, and it's that's the last film they play, and his film is just showcasing in his very slow and meditative way the last day of this theater screening a movie. And it again, in terms of plot, it's incredibly minimal. Like, we just kind of follow characters here and there. We have a lot of incredibly long stationary takes. And we follow some of the worker characters that kind of we kind of just see their role in this theater department. And I don't know, there's something really haunting about it, in the sense that we kind of see this residual and repetitive and pretty much cultural element that cinema brings, and how it's home for a lot of people, and how it contributes to this vital social element of our lives. Obviously the ones that love cinema, and how without it we kind of feel a void in our lives, and how we do rely on it, on this social necessity of it. But yeah, I don't know, honestly, like in terms of like discussing this film, it's quite difficult, because it is more about the experience. Like, it is more just about taking it in for what it is, being patient with it, and just having a kind of like cathartic, and just kind of having like a cathartic experience with it, really. And like very like reflective, just a really like reflective experience. And yeah, I think I don't know if watching the actual movie Dragon Inn's gonna help. I didn't, and the people that in the Discord that watched the actual movie Dragon Inn before watching this said it didn't really do much, except for well, I won't say that. I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen it, but I'll just say that overall I enjoy my experience with it. It is rewarding, and I think if you love cinema, I think you'll get something out of it regardless. You know, other than that, I don't like, if you're not, obviously, like, if you're not a huge fucking fan of movies, and you're not big on like the theater experience, then I don't think you're gonna really care about it. But this is a film that is like, it's made for film lovers, people who have like a deep connection with cinema and the whole theatrical experience, to really get something out of it. But anyway, I'll stop talking about it. I'll also give Goodbye Dragon Inn a 7 out of 10. All right, we're on to the last film. I'm pretty excited to talk about this one. Technically, I watched this in June. It was on June 1st, but it's fresh in my head, and I have to talk about it. I'm talking about a film called The Happiness of the Katakuris. This is a film directed by Takashi Miike, and this film is fucking batshit. This movie is bananas, and I really, really loved it for that. Has one of the most like random and just batshit opening sequences I've seen in a film in a long time. With the use of stop motion animation, it's just so weird and out there and hilarious. Like, I knew from the opening sequence I was more than likely gonna love this movie. But really interesting thing about this movie is that it's actually a musical. Um, and going into that scares me because I am, for those who know, I'm not the biggest fan of musicals. It's a film genre that's really hard for me to get into. It's a genre that will consistently take me out throughout the experience. And that, like, the whole, like, I actually loved the musical element of this movie. It felt so humorous and ironic and aware of itself. And I realized when musicals are more the humorous side, I tend to like them. And this one is definitely like that. It's definitely the case with this one. They're just so fucking like, again, they have like this satirical spoofy element of them that I just find really, really hilarious. And even like some of the choreography is just really funny. Especially the first part where they find their first dead body, which, by the way, in terms of plot, is basically about a family where the head of the household invests in this property on the countryside because he got a tip that there's going to be a main road built there soon and people are going to need a place to stay, and he plans and intends to use the house as like a hotel or like a bed and breakfast kind of place for travelers. And he's desperate for people because he's invested in it and no one's coming, and he just needs people to come so he can have he can have his debts paid off and he can have a career. And yeah, I'll just say one thing leads to another, and they just have the worst luck. They just are dealt with so much misfortune and are having to resort to doing very immoral things in order to keep their dream alive. And it's very dark and it's very tongue-in-cheek and really hilarious in my opinion. Like this, I found this movie very funny throughout the entire experience, because it just felt really aware of itself. The dark comedy really works, and I cared about this family. Like, even though they ended up again doing really immoral things, I really couldn't help but still feel bad for them and root for them. I love the connection between the grandfather and the grandmother. Like their romantic connection, I just really bought and I felt it. And there's even like a like a karaoke musical dance number where, like, again, it's to express their love and gratitude towards each other, and it's like funny and it's just so good. Really pretty much loved all the dance numbers in this movie and all the songs. Really, they're all great. But yeah, I don't know, like in terms of like disappointment with it, the poster has that weird like fairy monster creature, whatever the hell that is. And we only get that creature like in the first, like in the opening sequence, and that's it. After that, like has nothing to do with the movie at all. It's not incorporated in any way, and I just thought I thought that was a little misleading in a really unfair way. Maybe there's just like, again, I think there's like a symbolic element to it, just about how like the world is chaos and one thing leads to another, and there is no such thing as really like luck or bad luck. It's just shit just happens, and if it happens for you, it's good. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. But overall, like, it just seemed like, I don't know, I really wanted, it seemed like the way that it's set up that we were right to expect more of that kind of, more of that creature to be incorporated, but it wasn't. So in that way, it was kind of underwhelming. And also the last like 20 minutes, I felt like could have been better overall. I mean, that's not bad though. Like, I still enjoyed it, but I feel like the way that conflicts got resolved and what the story led up to, it just, I don't know. I guess I just wanted more. But I don't know. Overall, like, I just thought this movie was funny. I thought it was really entertaining, and I thought it was incredibly dumb, but also smart in its own dumb way. And I just enjoyed it. I definitely recommend it. Just know, like, it reminds me of stuff that I would see on like late night Adult Swim. Like, just really shit posty kind of humor, trippy kind of humor, dark humor, and it was everything that I like in a comedy. So yeah, I don't know. I'll stop talking about it, but it is a great movie, and I definitely recommend it. I'll give The Happiness of the Katakuris a solid to strong 8 out of 10. I can't wait. I can't wait to watch it again. As soon as it was over, I kind of wanted to watch it again. But that's it. That's all I got to say. It's been a while since I did these, so apologize if I was a little rusty. But that's about it. By the way, don't forget to check out the top 5 horrors of the 21st century that I did with Sammy's reviews. I had a lot of fun doing that. I'm going to be doing some more collabs with her in the future. But that's about it, guys. If you really enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.